I'm proud to be a co-author of this legislation, A New Direction. And I just might want to add that on that new vision from 1997, it was another German and Italian that teamed up to put forth a piece of legislation that I think is going to be great for America, great for passenger rail service in this country. I want to reinforce what the chairman said. I support a national passenger rail system, but we can't continue to support a system that's had to have significant money pumped into it by the federal government. The operations of it haven't been something that reflect a competitive system, that reflect a system that more people want to ride. It's been, the ridership, especially in the Northeast Corridor, has been stagnant over the last 20 years or so. And so I think A New Direction, it's time for it. Because as we look at America, with 300 million people to a little over 300 million people today. It took us 65 years to go from 200 million to 300 million. It's going to take us 30 years to go from 300 to 400 million people. And the corridors that are congested today are only going to become more congested as as the population grows. So the time is now to have a new direction in passenger rail, and I think that we're going to head there. Putting competition in place is going to have the same effects, I believe, on passenger rail as that the deregulation of the airline industry, the deregulation of the trucking industry, and of the freight rail system that we did over 30 years ago in this country, and they've been successes. And I might add that all three of those occurred under a Democratic president. As a Republican, I'd like to take credit for it, but Democrat presidents saw the importance of putting competition in place, and again, the American people have benefited by competition and deregulation of those industries. As the chairman pointed out, we want to model successes. One other thing we need to look at is what we're going to provide for future generations, and look at what Amtrak's done, their track record over the past 30 years. I want to point out there's been a few lines in this country that have gone to private sector. One, I want to point out the Florida Tri-Rail system. When it was put out for bid a few years ago, Amtrak bid $162 million, and Viola bid $97 million. That's about $70 million difference. And the private sector now has taken it over. It's increasing ridership, and that's the kind of thing we have to look at. Past record and model after successes around this country and around the world. The portion that I'm going to cover today is the intercity passenger rail competition, state-supported routes, first of all. There are 15 states around the country that currently pay Amtrak to operate intercity passenger rail. And unlike the Northeast Corridor, most of those supported routes run on freight rail systems. And that's a very unique and important partnership, one that as I go through this, we want to make sure that the freight rails aren't affected negatively by this. That's extremely important to make sure that we continue to have a strong freight rail system, one that's not subsidized by the government, and the only freight rail system in the world that's not subsidized by their government. We're going to create competition and improve service by promoting competition in the states. This initiative is going to be a competitive procurement process for a menu of services, from the operations, the rolling stock, to, if they so wish, the state's desire to contract out the services provided on that train. We'll establish a panel of experts to recommend best practices to help the states along as they move forward. And again, we're going to save taxpayer dollars. This allows the states to keep money that's saved through the competitive bid process, but then again setting up a new allocation process in the year 2020 to reflect the cost savings that are achieved through competition and reduce the amount the taxpayer on the federal level is subsidizing these routes. Again, as I said, we want to protect the freight rail interests. It involves the host freight rails through market-driven access negotiations. So there has to be a negotiation there. It has to be good for both parties. You can't negatively affect one with a positive effect on the other. We want to create and protect jobs. For those here in the room, and I see labor is represented here today, we want to create jobs, and we want to make sure that this provides hiring preferences for any displaced Amtrak workers, and it requires states to maintain current levels of services and creates private sector jobs jobs, but they're going to have to be talking to those folks that are employed today. As I said, we're going to make sure we put preferences out there for those displaced workers. But we want to create jobs. I think the chairman, I don't know if he mentioned it in his opening comments, but Amtrak over the last 10 years has gone from 29,000 employees to 19,000 employees. And as he pointed out in his example of Virgin Rail, they've increased employment by a third through private and competition coming to bear. So this is about more jobs, not less jobs. And Virgin Rail's example is they're all union jobs. So we're not out here trying to replace union employees with non-union employees. The second part is the long-distance passenger rail competition. And this initiative will be handled by the DOT, but it will allow for competition on Amtrak's least successful lines in an effort to reduce the federal subsidy and improve service. Amtrak's long-distance routes today are subsidized $117, almost $118 per passenger, and that's on average. And you look at the Sunset Limited, which travels from New Orleans to Los Angeles, the subsidy there is almost $408. We're losing $408 on every passenger. Amtrak's failing these long-distance routes, I believe they need to be put out for competition, and I believe that will reduce the burden that's placed on the taxpayers. And this is building upon the language we put in PREA in 2008. And there are those out there that will say, well, that we allowed for competition or for bidding process on 2 lines, and nobody ever bid on it, and that's what the detractors will say, that nobody ever bid on it. Well, that's because the FRA never put the procedure in place. So the FRA blocked it, in effect. So, as I said, the traveling public will benefit, I believe, when competition is put in place, because it will promote the services that passengers require. They will promote the frequencies. They will quote the level of service that again, that the market will demand. And in the models we've seen around the world, it will work. It allows for private sector operators to make a profit, and as I said, that's the greatest incentive for attracting passengers. It'll save the taxpayer dollars by mandating that operating subsidies for contracted long-distance services will be lower than the Amtrak subsidies. And again, it protects freight rail interests by the host freight rail will, through market-driven access, there will be negotiations. So one party, again, can't benefit while it significantly hurts another party. And again, back to creating jobs. We believe the competition, increased ridership, you'll have to hire people to take care of passengers and increase service. So once again, we'll have those types of preferences and protections in there for labor that are those folks currently working for Amtrak. Again, I think this is exciting. I think it's an opportunity for us to take passenger rail to a new level in this country, something that I think that is desperately needed. So with that, I'll yield back to the chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Shuster. And we do have a number of people already lined up for questions from around the country. And we've got folks here. Let's get one from the audience, and then we'll, yes, sir, that gentleman on the end.
I want to commend you, Chairman Mica and Congressman Shuster, for taking the leadership on this. We think this is the first necessary step in getting true high-speed rail in America. And there's a good precedent. France and Spain both went through the same things in terms of taking their state-run rail operation, breaking them into 2 different companies, and then investing, and now they both have great rail systems. France even just announced recently, SNCF made $1.5 billion net profit last year operating passenger trains. So this can be very beneficial to the nation. My question is, are you capturing or enabling this legislation to capture the real estate benefits around the stations as a way to help finance the system? Because as soon as you put new high-speed stations, you immediately create billion-dollar real estate potential deals at every station with new infill development, new office buildings, new condos. And so there's a way there to partner with some real estate developers to actually help pay for the system.
Well, again, and look at the provisions. I haven't seen the exact language, but we are trying to encourage, as part of the plan that's submitted by any of the bidders, transit-oriented development. That may not be possible in, say, the entire operational package or the infrastructure package, maybe. If there's, that's why we wanted to see how these bids would come in, either as turnkey with everything, or is it more beneficial to have the infrastructure in one package and the operations in the other. And maybe folks will come forward with pretty robust plans if they do control, again, the infrastructure for development along the way. But I think in any place where you see success, whether it's a local transit system or any of these high-speed systems or good intercity passenger rail service, you do see transit-oriented development that just knocks your socks off. And I think this opens that possibility much more than just keeping us sort of stuck in neutral. We're going to take one from a call-in, and I think we've got, what is it? Is that former Governor Rendell? Welcome, Governor Rendell. Can you hear us here?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I can hear.
Go right ahead.
Sure. Well, Mr. Chairman and Congressman Shuster, number one, I want to congratulate you for your leadership on this issue. It's a vitally important issue to all of the states in the Northeast Corridor, and for all of us who believe that there's a future for high-speed rail in America. There is a future, but we have to prove high-speed rail can work, and there's only one place to start, and that's in the Northeast Corridor, where we have a built-in ridership, where we have people that are ready to go, and where we can build a dedicated high-speed rail line. And let me emphasize that we cannot do this on existing lines. We have to build our own dedicated line. We can't share a line with commuter trains. We can't share a line with freight traffic. It has to be a dedicated line. But if we do this, I believe it will be a tremendous economic boon and quality of life improvement for the people in the Northeast Corridor, and it will demonstrate to America that high-speed rail can work. It's a smart plan to put our resources and our focus here, number one. Number two, let me say that I am not a critic of Amtrak. To the contrary, I am a great fan of Amtrak. As you know, Mr. Chairman, and Congressman Shuster knows, Amtrak in Pennsylvania during my time as governor cooperated on one of the most successful ventures in raising the speed of trains. We took Philadelphia to Harrisburg line and cut the travel time by each putting in $37 million each, Amtrak and the Commonwealth. We cut the travel time from 2 hours to an hour and a half, and ridership increased from 898,000 a year to over 1.2 million a year. So if you build high-speed rail, they will ride it, no ifs, ands, and buts about it. And in terms of this project itself, why not let Amtrak try to build it? For a plain and simple reason that you know and I know and everyone in the United States Congress knows, there is not going to be $100 billion of federal money available for a dedicated high-speed line for just the Northeast Corridor. And the only way we're going to get the money necessary to make this line a reality is a public-private partnership with the states along the line, federal government, and the private sector all contributing. And there is precedent for this. As you know, Mr. Chairman, in the Tiger Grant program, the very best part of the stimulus program were the Tiger Grants, Pennsylvania joined with 5 other states in 2 major freight improvement projects. 1, the Crescent Corridor with Norfolk Southern, and 2, the National Gateway with CSX. The states ponied up money, the federal government put in money, and the private sector put in money, and we have dramatically and will dramatically change the delivery of freight rail in the eastern half of the country. We can do the same thing for passenger rail here. This should not be viewed as an anti-Amtrak proposal. It should be viewed as a proposal by those of us who believe that there is a future for high-speed rail. It can work. There can be the proper public oversight. As you know, I wanted to privatize the operation of the Pennsylvania Turnpike. We prepared a contract with the winning bidder where there was more than adequate state oversight of all the crucial maintenance issues and the like. So it can be done, it should be done, and with your leadership, I believe it will be done.
Well, thank you, Governor Rendell, for monitoring our rollout here today. And